Welcome to Desert Island Tims. My castaway this week is a woman who is growing in stature as a journalist and blogger. She also edited Downfall, How Rangers Self-Destructed by Phil McGillivan. Angela Haggerty, how are you?
I'm very well, Billy. Thanks, how are you?
I'm not too bad, Angela. Growing up, what was it like for you?
Okay, first of all, it's a bit surreal sitting in Billy Noel's studio. Okay, memories of growing up. I've lived in Butte for most of my life, although I was born in Glasgow. For about a year when I was a baby, we lived in Butte, and then my parents took us back to Glasgow. I have 3 older brothers. I'm the baby of the family, and my parents like to move a lot as well. So they took us back to Glasgow, and we stayed in Balornock, and I still remember the street name. That was Burmulloch Road, and I have an amazing amount of memories from such a young age in Glasgow. It's really strange because I was very, very young, but we moved back to Butte just before I was about 4, so I've lived there most of my life. And it was my parents took us back there because they wanted us to have a better upbringing, I think, than they had. They didn't have the best of experiences of growing up in Glasgow, so they took us to somewhere they thought was quieter, where we would get a better education. And it was certainly a lot quieter than Glasgow. It's a very, very small place, a population of about 7,000 people. And it's become very dilapidated now. It used to be the big holiday destination. That's how my parents remembered it. I think that's why it appealed to them. It was the big down the water place where the Waverley went. And it's changed a lot now. There's not very much work. Businesses have closed. It's the same story everywhere, but I think Butte had it coming a little bit longer than, before the recession hit. It was already on the downturn. But when I was growing up, it was still quite a fun place. We still had a bit of a tourist industry there, and it was quiet. It was the kind of place where you can go out and you can leave your doors open. You can leave your kids to just go out and play. It's probably nothing like it would have been if we were growing up in Glasgow. So it was sort of quite generic that way. I think quiet. We did have a Catholic school there, so we went there, and then the secondary school was everyone went to the same secondary school. Just quite a quiet upbringing, really, I think.
When did you come back to Glasgow?
I came back to Glasgow last year. After I had finished studying. I had commuted to Glasgow for a couple of years, so I'd been living half of the week in Glasgow and half the week in Butte because I was at college, and it just was easier than doing I did do the round trip a couple of times. This is like a 4.5-5 hour round trip, so that wasn't appealing. So moved to Glasgow full time last year, so I've been here for a while, and it's better than Butte. Butte still has its appeals. It's nice to go back there. It's nice to visit family, but it's just too quiet. There's nothing. There's no work. There's no real prospects, I'm sad to say. In Glasgow, there's more opportunities.
So I take it Butte has got a lot to do with the choice of your first song?
Oh yeah, they love this band down in Butte. Yeah, it really reflects the serenity. My first song is quite an angry, shouty, political song. It's by a band that I love, and I've loved since I was a kid. My first memories of this band was when we were living in Butte. Again, I have 3 older brothers, and I'm the baby. They were all born within 3 years of each other, and then there's a gap, and then there's me. So they were a bit older. And the first memory I have of this band was hearing "Killing in the Name," which, if anybody knows that song, has a very controversial ending, especially when your brothers are about 14 or 15 and your parents hear it. So ever since then, though, I have loved this band. I think they have very strong political, angry songs, and that just really appeals to me. It's something to really kind of shout and bawl at if you're kind of angry at the world. So it's a song called "Testify," and it's a band called Rage Against the Machine.
Rage Against the Machine and Testify. What took you into the world of journalism?
I was a bit late going into the world of journalism, and it was purely by accident. I'd been interested in politics for quite a long time. Since I was a kid, it's been a kind of running feature in my life. So I was told, maybe, when I was around about the age of 17, 18, by some friends that they thought I should be looking into doing journalism, but I didn't want to do it because I felt like it was quite a compromised industry, shall we say. I felt like it was ruthless. To be able to succeed in journalism, I felt that you had to be willing to do almost anything, which I think is, in light of the things that we now know about the news of the world and papers like that, at the time I was right. I didn't quite know that. I didn't know things like that were going on, obviously, but I was right that to get ahead, you had to be willing to do things that I don't think any journalist thinks that they're going to do. when they go into the industry. Now, that's not to say that that's how it was for all journalists, but certainly for a lot, to feel that you're going to go anywhere, it becomes very, very ruthless and cutthroat, and I didn't think that was for me. Thought maybe there would be other ways to not be interested in politics, but try and make a career from it, or dedicate my career or life to it some other way. So for years I kind of sidelined it and decided that I wasn't going to pursue it. So after I left school when I was 16, and I didn't do an awful lot. As I said, I was interested in politics. I used to go on a lot of protests and was quite active that way. And other than that, I just worked. I didn't really do anything. So, and then I went to live in England for a year when I was about 22, I think. I went to live in the south of England, a little town called Farnham in Surrey. And I spent about a year down there. Then I came back to Butte after my mother took ill, and she died a short time later. She was diagnosed with cancer, and I think she died within about 3 weeks of the diagnosis, so it was very quick. So I came back to Scotland after that, and I got an old job that I'd had years ago in the local Celtic pub, the Galatea Bar. I'm sure a few people will know it. I got my old job back in there as soon as I went back to Butte, and started to settle down again. And I happened to read an article in the local paper saying that there was a new radio station setting up called Butte FM, and they were looking for volunteers just to help out with the running of things. And I thought, well, I've got nothing to do and I'm bored, so I went up and spoke to them and said, is there anything I can do to help out, some administrative stuff, some office duties, whatever. And the station manager, strangely enough, from years, we'd never met, but from years ago, from when again around about the age of 17, 18, when I started really getting into politics, I used to write some letters to the local paper. Now, it was a tiny little local paper, right, and I used to write letters to them about Palestine and stuff, right. It couldn't be more misplaced than the Buteman, and that's likely why he remembered it, because it just stuck out. He had remembered that, so when I went up to visit, he had the idea that I might do the current affairs show, and I had never in a million years thought about actually doing anything on air, but I kind of reluctantly agreed to give it a go, and I just loved it. Really, really loved it, and I seemed to be really good at it, the kind of chasing the stories and finding the stories, and I think it became a kind of fairly popular show for a small community radio station that had just started up. So, and then someone else at the station said to me that I should think about journalism school, as she called it. The editor of the local paper told me that Cardonal College offered one of the best courses that he knew of, so I put an application in just in the off chance, and I got in. So yeah, and it was the radio show that got me in, because I wasn't properly qualified, because I just left school at 16. I didn't even have the entry qualifications for the course. So doing that year in radio, I learned you learn so much about journalism when you're actually doing it, even if it's actually the best way to learn about journalism, I think, is at a very local level, because you learn how local government works. You have to go to boring community council meetings, but you learn a lot about how people interact and engage and what matters to people, especially at a local level, and that is important, because it's like your foundation, and then you can build up from there. You can build up through all the levels from there, but it's a great education, and I really in hindsight I really value that. So I got into college, and that was in what year is it now? Was it 2011 I started in college? No, 2010, because I finished in 2012. 2-year course, and from there things just kind of took off. So I stopped doing the radio show, focused on college and just a few little bits and bobs. I was doing a local newsletter for a local company, really quite sort of boring local stuff, College was going well, and then of course Rangers implode. And it was just such a great if you can just take the being a football fan thing aside for a minute, for a journalist, it was a great story. It was an amazing story. There was just so much stuff coming all the time. So I started reading Phil's stuff. I think I was still in my first year at college. I started reading Phil's blog and the Rangers tax case blog, and everyone was talking about it. You're kind of meeting people in the supermarkets, they're going, did you read Phil's latest? It was a really strange time, really strange. So I started reading his stuff. I'd been reading it for months, and I sent him a friend request on Facebook, and that's how we first actually got chatting, was all through social media. Mm-hmm. So I then in second year of college was editing the local newspaper, the college newspaper, but for the local area, the Cardonal Courier. I was the editor of the online side, which was the first time we'd ever had a website. So Ibrox was kind of within our catchment area, you know, we're on the south side. So I thought, well, I really want to try and to work on this story a little bit more. So that was really my introduction to real controversy, was the Rangers story. As I say, it was a fantastic story to work on, really, really interesting. And of course, got talking to Phil through social media, and then that then developed when he had a look at the work I was doing on the Courier, which as an editor, he then decided to ask me if I would edit Downfall, which at the time was supposed to be a self-published book. And then when he did then later sign a contract with the publisher, he decided to keep me on as editor. So my introduction to journalism was very slow at first, very local level politics, and then it went a bit mad.
It's interesting to hear you say that the implosion of Rangers was a great story, yet the mainstream media in Scotland chose to ignore it.
I know, it baffles me still. I mean, I understand, especially working with Phil, you know, and anyone that's read Downfall knows that there's a media section, and he goes into why journalists were avoiding the story. We know why Succulent Lamb, we know why they were avoiding the story, but I just think as a journalist, it must, you know, if you're a real journalist, that should be torture. When you know that story is there and it's there for the taking, but you can't touch it, or you won't touch it. That wasn't an option for me. As I said, I didn't want to go into journalism when I was younger for that very reason, because I felt that you then become compromised. I always had it in my mind that I wasn't going to go down that route, even if it meant working on things like Downfall, where the media do get a very hard time. And if I want to work in Glasgow, I had to wonder, does that affect my prospects in any way? Am I going to be seen as being someone that you just, you know, you don't want to have their byline in your paper because it's too controversial? Because as we know, having your name in some tabloids in Scotland means that you might have a lot of complaints going your way, and it does seem to work. So it was a risk, I suppose, a risk that if I want to have a career, I might be making that more difficult in Glasgow. But the alternative was to stand back from it and not get involved in the story, just for the sake of having possibly better job prospects. And I thought, well, the minute that I do that is the minute I should leave journalism, because I'm not in it for the right reasons.
Your second song, Angela?
My second song is, again, it's from a band that I was introduced to when I was very young, even younger than the first song, actually. I remember this band from about the age of 4 or 5. This is one of the first albums that I ever knew, which is the album The Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden, which, again, if you come from a Catholic background, my parents were horrified by our taste in music. My first ever favourite song was on this album, which isn't the song I've chosen, but it's a song called Children of the Damned. Now, I mean, even the title's terrifying. And I was only about 5, and I didn't know what the song and the lyrics mean. I just liked the tune. My parents must have worried about me. So this is a fantastic album. It's a great, for anyone that knows Iron Maiden, The Number of the Beast is a classic, and this is a great song from it. It's a song called, I've kind of steered away from the songs about the devil for this one a little bit, so this is a song called The Prisoner by Iron Maiden. That was
The Prisoner by Iron Maiden. You've done a fair bit of travelling over the last few years, Angela. Can you ever see yourself going back to Butte?
No, not now. I really can't. It strangely doesn't really feel like home. I don't miss it. I don't know whether that might change as time goes on, but I actually felt more like Glasgow was home. And in a strange way, I think it's because we were the only bit of the family that splintered away, I suppose. All my mum's family are in Glasgow, my dad's family, you know, they all settled in Glasgow. So I suppose there's more history for my family in Glasgow. So that maybe feels a bit more like home. And I would think the only connection I have now to Butte is my dad. I think really if I can take my dad out of the equation, I don't even see myself going back to visit very much.
I'll go back to journalism for a moment. Was there anyone in your family who were journalistically inclined or into writing? Well,
it came from my mother, absolutely. My mother she had a great way with words. She was renowned for that. My mother was a civil servant, though. She was never into anything journalistically, but I grew up with a Celtic daft father and a mother who didn't like football but was very, very political. You know, she all she ever did was read or knit. You know, she'd get bored of reading now and again. again, and she'd take up crochet. But she read, it was always political books that she was reading. She read a lot of kind of biographies. She liked to know about individuals in politics. She could tell you anything you wanted to know about the royal family. She'd read all the books about them, but she wasn't a royalist. She certainly wasn't. She was anything but. I thought it was, outdated and hereditary and all that sort of stuff. But she thought being educated about something was important. So I grew up with that, and I grew up in a family where 3 news bulletins a day, and we watched all of them. Question time, news night, all of that stuff. My mum always had it on, and then in her later years, she would just have BBC News 24 going on all night, on the TV when that finally came about. So she was a very political, very moral woman. She was. We were quite a strict Catholic family as well. My mum, her faith was a big part of her life. So we were brought up with a very strong, politically minded woman, but who took her morals, I think, from the church, from her faith. My mum's sister has told me that their upbringing was very similar, even though some of the family may no longer really be religious. That sort of the upbringing with your conscience is very, very important. I think people underestimate how important that is in a religious upbringing, actually. My mum was an amazing woman. She really was very, very strong-willed, and she grew up in difficult circumstances, I think, because they were in their 40s before they started having children. So they were born in 1940, Glasgow. And I think my mother had something like 13 brothers and sisters, and I think only about 5 of them made it past childhood. So she really came from a tough as nails upbringing. And my granny was, a force to be reckoned with. And she hated men as well. She was a real force to be reckoned with, and a character. So we've grown up, and all throughout my family we've had very strong women. So they've always been role models, I think, for me. But my mum particularly, she brought us up that the most important thing is your conscience, really, and your morals, and trying to do the right thing, and nothing else matters. The material stuff, none of that makes any difference. It means absolutely nothing, and it won't bring any happiness to you. And she's absolutely right. No arguments with that. And you look back, as I said, we came from quite a poor upbringing, materialistically poor. But I think that being brought up by parents with the moral fibre that my parents have was far more important and valuable than anything else could have been.
I reckon I've done a very good job. What would your next song be?
My next song, this was one of my first ever favourite songs. Again, it's a band I was introduced to when I was a kid by my older brothers. And this, I don't know why. I have no explanation why I love this song. I just always did. It's maybe not the most well known of Nirvana's songs, but it's just always been a favourite of mine. So it's a song called Pennyroyal Tea. That was
Pennyroyal Tea by Nirvana. Can you remember the first time you ever went to see Celtic?
I can very easily, Billy, because it was only a couple of years ago. So, and I know that any of those people out there who may not like me, and there must be very few of them, you do get charged with this a lot on Twitter of, well, you don't go to Celtic games. Well, I do go to Celtic games now, but the first Celtic game I ever went to was in the last game of the season, where we were blame Inverness Cally Thistle, where we should have won the league, but we never. We'll say no more. And that was the first game I ever went to with my dad. Right. Now I know people, they like to make a fuss about how many games you go to, or that's the measure of a fan, and that really does annoy me, because as I've said already, we grew up in quite a poor family, and we lived in an island which you have to get a boat and a train just to get to Glasgow. Then you've got to get to Celtic Park. You've got to have tickets. That was not an option for us. That was never an option for us. Holidays were something other people got, and going to the football was something other people got as well. It was never an option for us. But nonetheless, we grew up absolutely daft Celtic fans. We really did. My dad's Celtic is his life. It really is. But my dad's dad, I think he was the treasurer of the Springburn CSC. I think that's where he lived. I think it was the Treasurer, but he was involved in their club for years. My dad can't remember what he did 5 minutes ago, but he can tell you anything about Celtic in the 50s. You know, he's got an encyclopedic mind when it comes to Celtic. The best memories I have of my childhood are quite often Celtic memories. I didn't need to be at the games to still get that. You know, you don't have to always go to Celtic Park to get that. You really don't, because it is more than that. It's a cultural thing. It's more than a club, as they say. And I was, brought up in the days before the internet. Really, that really kind of kicked in when I was about 12 or 13 at school. And even then, it was years before we got a computer or ever thought about having the internet at home. You know, that was for rich people back then. So it used to be books. You know, the first ever journalistic kind of thing I wrote, I was 12, and it was a kind of 3-page thing I did for my English class about Celtic Football Club. And all of it just came from memory, from books that I had read growing up, because you didn't have the internet to go and research on. You used to just write things down. And so that was our Celtic upbringing. All came from hearing stories, people telling you stories about the old Celtic and all the old games. And we used to listen to all this. My dad, right enough, he could go to the pub and watch it on the TV, but we grew up listening to Celtic games in the wireless, as he called it. And I still like listening to Celtic games on the radio. I think there's a kind of there's an excitement that you get from the commentary and the crowd going that you don't really get on the TV the same way. So I still don't mind listening to it on the radio. But that was how it was for us. And the first season that I was really into Celtic, again, being brought up with the 3 big brothers, my dad, it was always a feature. But the first season I was really into Celtic was the season that they stopped 10 in a row. It was the Wim Jansen season. And it was the season that I went to secondary school. So out of primary school into secondary school, I was 11, so I think it's that kind of age where you start to develop your own interests, properly, and Celtic became one of mine. The highlights of my week was when the Celtic View came out every week, and I'd save up my pocket money so I could go and buy the Celtic View. And the first proper game I think I remember was the Old Firm game where Stubbs scored in the last minute of the game and equalised. And that's the first game I can remember watching, because I'm sure that was on the TV. It must have been on the TV that night, because I was watching it. And I was, my mum was sitting, she was knitting. Dad's away to the pub. My mum's sitting knitting, and just remember seeing the look of horror on her face when she realised that they'd got me as well. I was just going mad, shouting, bawling at the TV. And Stubbs was my hero player for the rest of the season. From that game on, I was just absolutely obsessed with Celtic. I was Celtic mad. And again, the idea of going to Celtic Park was never on our radar when we were growing up, but it didn't matter. So it does annoy me a little bit when you do see that on Twitter or the social networks, people arguing about how big a Celtic fan they are compared to someone else because they've had a disagreement over something. And I think it's a real, especially given the club's origins of poverty, it really does annoy me when I see someone having a go because they don't go to all the games. They don't have the money to go to all the games. And I think that's very unfair, because Celtic is about a lot more than just going to Celtic Park. Although after that time, my first visit to Paradise, it really was paradise, and I try and get there now as often as I can.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. Your next song?
My next song is again another one of the bands I was introduced to when I was wee, and this was one I was a little bit older, and so were my brothers. And your brothers become bullies when they get older, and you're the baby of the family. So they had all these great records, and I wasn't allowed to borrow any of them. So what I would do is wait till they went out and then go in and sneakily record it, and then just listen to it when they weren't in the house. And this was one of the albums that I did that with. It was so it's a song called Baba O'Reilly, and it's by The Who.
Baba O'Reilly by The Who. Right, Angela, what irritates you?
How long have you got? Is this a long show? Rephrase that. What doesn't irritate me? Journalists have to be irritated. That's what motivates us. Being angry at something. I think a lot of things irritate me, but it's probably really cliche stuff like ignorance irritates me, and not being able to tolerate someone else's opinion irritates me. But generally, things like that do. That's why you have half the problems in the world that you do. It's difference of an opinion. I don't know, I can't think in specifically. Cliff Richard.
Cliff Richard. Well, you've just lost half my fans there.
Cliff Richard really does irritate me. That's a good one. Cliff Richard I can't stand. I really, if he's on the TV, it'll ruin my day. I can't stand Cliff Richard. He's just a horrible, slimy. I mean, it's like nails in a blackboard to me. Cliff Richard.
Why did you pick Congratulations as your next song?
So yeah, if the people who don't like me really wanted to annoy me, just send me Cliff Richard clips. That'll do it.
I'll be deluged. You're in trouble. Right, your next song, which isn't Cliff Richard.
It's not Cliff Richard, no. See if you play Cliff Richard.
I won't, honestly.
My next song it's a classic artist who I think you said he's been on the show. It's a running theme now in the show. So this is, now I did ask you if you could get the acoustic version of this song. I don't know if you're saying you did. I prefer the acoustic version of this song. It's by an artist again that I love, Neil Young, and the song is called Powderfinger.
That was Powderfinger by Neil Young. How do you relax?
Relax with great difficulty.
Right.
I don't know, I'm always working. I think journalists are always working, so you're always paying attention to the news, and if you're paying attention to the news you find it very difficult to relax. So the usual old ways, a glass of wine, a bottle of wine maybe, that's it. I've been told that before. I used to go and get massages years ago, and I was told by the woman, the massage therapist, that if I didn't find a way to relax I was going to end up like a hunchback by the age of 40 because I just have tension and all the time. But I can't help it. I don't know how. I've tried taking baths and bath salts and candles and all that stuff. I don't know how to relax. I think I've come to the conclusion I just don't know. I think I'm relaxed and apparently I'm not, so I think it's just being switched on all the time. You're always sort of thinking about your mind's always buzzing, because I think it has to be. In journalism it's a difficult job that way. It's difficult to have a life outside of journalism. You quite often find journalists who marry journalists because they're the only people that understand how that industry works, and the fact that you can never be you can't leave it at the door at 5 o'clock. You carry it with you all the time, and if it's news and things like that you work in, then it's quite a high stress, fast paced job, so you forget how to relax. So there you go. I'm very irritated and I'm not relaxed.
That's a shame. Right, well, what's your next song?
My next song is very fitting.
Oh God.
We need to cheer this up a bit. It's a great how ironic. It's a band again, quite political, like the political music. It's a band called System of a Down, and it's a song called Lonely Day.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
5 years, annoying someone else probably. I've no idea. I really don't. I never think ahead. Just take each day as it comes. Things change too quickly. You can't predict how things are going to go, and I think if you get too stuck to a plan, you can be setting yourself up for disappointment almost. So I really don't know. I'd like to be further forward with my career, I suppose. That's the only thing I'm focused on just now, is just developing that. So I'm working just now, so and I'm enjoying my job. I'm carrying on the blog as well, and Twitter, and I'm also still working with Phil. I've just edited his next book, so that's got to go away and get a few more of the processes done before that's out in the shelves, but it shouldn't be too far away now. It'll be out hopefully in the summer, I think. So it's a book about anti-Irish racism. I don't think you'll mind me trailing that. It's a very, very good book, and it's what I think is very important in his work, is that he's highlighted that, he's articulated a very specific problem in Glasgow or in Scotland, although he does focus in Glasgow, that's never been fully recognised, I don't think, not in the way that he has brought it to people. And again, it's the online platform. You wouldn't get it in the papers, that kind of thing. So the online platform has allowed him to do that. So I'm pleased to still be working with Phil. That's been an education, working on Downfall. These really great experiences, and I've learned a lot from that. So I'm just hoping to take that on to the next thing, and we'll see what happens.
Sounds good. Your next song?
My next song is Fields of Athenry, which people, I suppose it seems a really obvious one, but that's a song for my mum. So it's a song that the first time I ever heard Fields of Athenry was at a women's guild church meeting thing that you go to with your mum, and a woman got up and sang it. I think someone was playing a guitar and she got up, and that's the first time I remember ever hearing it. And you know, she was one of those, it was older women in a women's guild group, but they all had tears in their eyes, and as well as the content of the song, I think it was just that she sang it so beautifully, and that's my first ever memory of the Fields of Athenry. And I know it was a song that my mother loved, and being a huge inspiration, big part of my life, her wisdom is something that I still call on when I'm making decisions. So that's a song for my mum, Fields of Athenry.
Right, we've now come to the part of the programme where I give you the complete works of the dandy and a copy of the Bible to take with you to your island. Would you like a copy of the Bible?
Of course I would. And the off chance that my dad's listening, of course I would.
Which other book would you take with you, and why?
Okay, well, Mrs. Politics over here is going to disappoint everyone, because the book, if I was going to a desert island and I could only take one book that I had to read again and again, I would take Harry Potter. And I knew that you would laugh. I knew it. It may be a bit of an unusual one, but if I had to read a book over and over again, it would be the Harry Potter books. If we're talking stories, then it would be the Harry Potter books, because the stop laughing. The books that I normally read are quite political, and again, I'm just dipping in and out, and I don't really. I'm terrible one for not finishing books. Once I think I've got the gist of it, I'll just write next one. So one of the only books that I've ever properly read, well, series of books, is all the Harry Potter books, and I've read them again and again because I think they are wonderful stories, and they do have this political undercurrent, which I think is a great thing for kids to read. It's all about the battle between good and bad, obviously, and you know, you have the Muggles, you know, and the purebloods and all that sort of stuff. So there's some moral lessons written in there. You know, if you Google it, you can find all about J.K. Rowling's politics and how she tried to sort of work a lot of stuff in. And I think they're just very well written. They're magical, really magical. I'd love to have the imagination that could come up with that. Absolutely magical books for kids to read. So, and for adults too. So I would take the Harry Potter, a bit greedy, and take the series.
Right, if you had to take a luxury with you, something to make your life a bit more bearable on the island, it can't be a phone, it can't be another human being, what would it be?
Chocolate.
Right,
no questions, chocolate.
Oh, what kind of chocolate?
Any kind of chocolate. Milk chocolate, not dark chocolate. Yeah, chocolate. That's all you need. Chocolate and Harry Potter and your songs sorted.
Fantastic. That leads us into your last song. What would your last song be?
My last song is my favourite song ever, and goes back to that season, the Wim Jansen season. This became my favourite song, and I always associate it with Celtic just because I heard it that season, and it's been my favourite song ever since. Nothing has ever compared to it. It's a bit on the long side, maybe, this song actually, so I hope you can all bear with it, but it's by a great band, probably my favourite band, Pink Floyd, and it's the last song. I think this is the last album that the last studio album that they ever did, The Division Bell, so it's the last song on that, so kind of the last Pink Floyd song. It's called High Hopes, and it's just wonderful. So as I said, it's a little bit on the long side, but I hope you will listen to it because it's a great one.
Angela Haggerty, thank you very much for being a Desert Island Tim.
Thank you for having me, Billy.